It's time for a word from our totally real sponsor.
There's these classic Bendy characters. Oh, hey enthusiasts, it's me, Connie McConnor. I'm here to show you a great deal on Aaron Lane's Streamily page right now.
AlvinMunk and Aaron Lane have teamed up to bring you a new Bendy Streamily print designed by Brandon Rourke, aka AlvinMunk.
With this special offer, which is just the basic offer, you can get a Aaron Lane signed print with Alvin Monk's artwork for $47 US plus shipping and handling. Isn't that a great deal?
If you are interested in buying this print, please go to www.streamily.com/Bendy. Or you can check the link in the description. And thank you, Aaron Lane, for the opportunity. Now back to the show. Hey enthusiasts, it's me, AlvinMunk. And today, I know this is a double interview week. We have the cartoonist behind the Bendy Krakow comics, Vannotes.
Hello, everyone. Good to be here.
I'm glad to have you on the show too, Vannotes. So, let's jump right into the questions, shall we?
Okay, sounds good.
So, question number one: can you give us a little bit of background about yourself before you became a cartoonist? Like, did you have any hobbies, any passions, anything before that?
Yeah, so before I was a cartoonist, I was a 2-year-old. So, yeah, I've essentially been a cartoonist ever since I was 3 years old, and making drawings and stories on giant rolls of butcher paper on the kitchen floor. Yeah, and I always feel like I've been a cartoonist. So even when I was growing up and thinking about like my future or whatever, um, I always thought of myself as having some kind of comics adjacent job. So whether it was becoming a biochemist, because that seemed to be the way to get superpowers in all the comic books I was reading. If you wanted to be the Hulk or something, or Ant-Man, you had to be a biochemist. But yeah, and then eventually, like, life continued on. I ended up going to the Minneapolis College of Art and Design in Minnesota. I'm actually representing today, which I didn't plan. But yeah,
Yay!
I ended up going to art school, developing my craft a lot. Had some really great classmates. Not my cat. My cat is
Aw.
not there. He's used to getting tossed during podcasts. But yeah, I developed my craft from there, and then ever since I got out of college, I've been working in some way, shape, or form as a professional cartoonist.
Nice. Quick little note. I'm also going to college to be a graphic design / cartoonist as well, so I relate to that a lot. I've had the also the very young age thing where I according to my mom, I started drawing when I was like 4 years old. So that's a very similar story to what I have. I'm very happy that I got to talk to someone who has a very similar experience with that.
Yeah. No, I mean, you definitely know it when you have this excitement about telling stories using words and pictures and comics and all those things. There's something in you for sure.
Yeah. I don't think I shared this, but I had the comic center right next to me. Um,
Oh, nice.
my
Yeah,
favorite piece of besides Dark Revival, it's my favorite piece of Bendy media right here. It's so good.
oh, Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and
No
I
problem.
know Maddie G and Ciro would also really appreciate that too. The two amazing artists that worked on it.
Congrats to you and the others every artist, every writer, everyone who worked on it. And Scholastic, of course, for publishing it.
Yeah, we had a good team all working on that project.
Mm-hmm. Then let's see. Question number 2. Do you have any? What is your favorite non-Bendy comic you've ever worked on?
Oh, favorite non-Bendy comic. I'd have to say I have a bunch of personal projects. I'd say a lot of the things that I've enjoyed working on have yet to be announced or come
Ooh.
out yet. So there's a lot of incredible projects. I would say I think based on the art that I'm getting back on this latest Spy Ninjas graphic novel, the third one. Uh, sorry, my cat is really wanting to be part of this interview. But I thought I kicked him out earlier and he snuck back in. But um, I would say as far as writing and one of my graphic novel projects with my writing, uh, I would say Mike Anderson. The pages I've seen back from the third Spy Ninjas book are some of the most proud that I've ever been of my writing being translated to translated art. I'm just gonna let Moomin hang out here.
Aw.
He's
Hello.
in kind of a mood. So yep, this is
That's
Moomin, everybody. He is a
special guest Moomin.
mean cat who is named after a very kind cartoon character, but he's a nasty mean cat.
Also say I thought I recognized the name Moomin.
Yeah, yep. Beloved Finnish cartoon character by Tove Jansson. So I guess he's just gonna chill here for the rest of the interview.
Okay, Moomin. Be good. So I'm very excited to see what you announce. And then maybe I'll do like a follow-up question, like once like on on like whatever social media you have, where I can like ask you the question again, like once like maybe a couple years down the line, I'll ask you the question again. It's like, hey, what's your favorite like comic you worked on that's not Bendy, and you can answer it. So
yeah. There's definitely a lot of projects, a lot of pitches in the works, a lot of things. Yeah, there's a lot of comics to come. So, and you always feel like the best about your projects that are in development, and then they come out and you're super tired of them, and then maybe in like 5 to 10 years they start feeling, you can look at them and be like,
yeah.
oh yeah, I know what I was doing there. That was pretty fun.
Next question is we're starting to one more generic question before we jump into the Bendy stuff.
Okay.
Not generic, you know what I mean, like non-Bendy stuff.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite cartoon character and why?
Ooh, that's a hard one. Cartoon character. So does this include like comics, or is this like animation characters
It
too?
can be anything. I consider cartoon characters comics. It can be anything.
Okay. It would definitely be Crazy Cat. So the
Ooh.
century-old comics character, Crazy and Ignatz. Crazy is a cat who is super in love with Ignatz, and Ignatz's favorite thing is to throw bricks and hit Crazy. So I actually love Crazy Cat so much that I have a Crazy Cat tattoo right here. So
Oh, cool.
yeah.
There's a lot
I
of
won't
dedication.
flash the audience here.
No, yeah. There's a lot of dedication though to like I love when people do that, when they get a tattoo with their favorite character wherever they choose.
And then I guess the trio would be, and they are tattooed on me, is I have a Superman here. Ooh, it's kind of hard to see. But yeah, I have a Superman on my arm and then an Astro Boy on my other arm.
Oh, so. Astro Boy is great. I haven't watched too much or seen too much Astro Boy. One of my friends is probably like clapping their hands in the audience right now because they're probably like they love Astro Boy.
Yeah,
So
I love and especially Pluto. I love the I haven't gotten to watch the Netflix show, but the Pluto manga that's based on an Astro Boy story is one of my favorite comics of all time.
nice. All right. I'm gonna jump into the Bendy question now. You ready?
Okay. Yeah.
So we have, how does it feel to be a part of the Bendy series and fandom officially? Thanks to this comic.
Yeah. So when I was approached about coming on board for Bendy, um, I knew vaguely about the franchise just from like having a niece and nephew who keep me up to date on certain things. So I try and watch and make sure I know what video games and fandoms are out there and happening, just because I love all that. And so I was contacted about working on the project with um, an initial collaborator that was on board, and then they left the project just because it didn't work out with them scheduling wise. And Scholastic brought me on board to continue the process. I'd already submitted some scripts and some writing, and I really got to dive in. I'm not a great horror survival player. That's not my video game niche. So I watched a lot of Let's Plays. A lot of Let's Plays. I watched the entire game in Let's Play form in order to like study up on it, and did deep dives on the wikis and the Reddits and the Tumblrs and the fan sites that were
Yeah.
out there, just to get a general sense. I wasn't paying too close attention, so if anyone sees any similarity to something they had before the graphic novel, I promise I wasn't trying to steal your original characters or anything. But yeah, no, I did kind of just a glance over, what fans were thinking about, what characters fans were excited by. I was excited to see that most of them were really into Boris, who's my favorite character. So
Boris is so good. Love Boris.
yeah, I love Boris.
He's such a
He's
little
a
nice
good
little guy. Love him.
good chap.
Let's see. Next question is, you answered that one actually. You answered that one. That was cool. You did a double whammy. It's like every interview I get a double whammy, which is cool. So
Yeah,
I
you were
always
gonna
wondered
ask
which
me what
question.
my
When I
my
was asking
favorite
what your
character
first
was.
that, but oh no, that's triple whammy then. My bad. 'Cause I was looking at
Oh,
the one where it says, "What your first what was your first impressions?" One, did you know what it was before you like landed the role? That was one question. So you answered it.
mm,
You're ahead of the game, like everyone here. Let's see. Now, oh, you answered that one too. Let's see. Okay, so okay, I'm gonna jump into this one. Ready?
okay.
What was your process when coming out for one of the many stories? What was you and your team's process? I mean, when coming out with one of the many stories in the comics.
Yeah, so when I kind of had to think of it holistically, like I had to look at it as a whole project, so it wasn't like story by story
Oh,
that I was
okay.
figuring things out. Scholastic and the Bendy crew really wanted to break it up into like these different eras of comics. So they really wanted like kind of this comic strip vibe, and they wanted the more like golden age comic vibe. So I had to kind of reverse engineer from that. So I dived really into different like comics that were coming out about that time, about like different characters that were being adapted from animation. So I read of a lot of the Floyd Gottfredson Mickey Mouse strips. Those are like classic 1930s like Disney comics, all about like Mickey having adventures that were like the blueprint for a lot of later comic strips, like the Carl Barks Donald Duck
Oh,
and
I
all
love
that kind of
those.
stuff. Yeah, yeah. So Floyd Gottfredson, I think Barks was maybe like a step behind Gottfredson. But those strips are really great, really pivotal. I looked at a few Popeye strips because those were that era had really good like action comedy, like comic book storytelling. So I was looking kind of at that area and that kind of vintage feel. And then I already had a sense for a lot of like golden age strips. I picked up a few just Golden Age comics just to kind of read, because that was again the era that we were looking at. So I looked at the Smithsonian guide to comics. There's a really good like Smithsonian guide, and it has a bunch of like Pogo and Little Lulu and things like that. So I did a read. I do a lot of research when I write, just as far as like getting a style down, getting a vibe down, especially for like a project that's so historical like this. I really wanted to make sure that I had a feeling for the era, but also you have to keep it kind of modern, but it's helpful to have an idea and context. So each of the strips I kind of had a framework for. Some of them were already like posters in the game, so I was able to they called that kind of the promotional comics era. So I had a bunch of those strips. The concept was already kind of laid out for me. Like I believe, I'll open up my copy here. So the promotional comics I said came out in like 1941 to 1946, like Construction Corruption and Train Trouble, Showbiz Bendy. Those were already posters that had like made it into the game or on their social media. And so I essentially adapted what it looked like the poster was.
Yeah.
The other comics I had a lot more free range. So I was like looking and I was like, well, let's do a superhero one. Let's do a purely comic, like kind of comic strip adventure of that time. Let's go and do a war comic. I didn't think they'd let me get away with doing a war comic, but they did.
The Alice the Aviator one, right?
Yeah. I didn't think they'd let me get away with that one, but sometimes I just throw wild things out there and they land. So
yeah.
And then for the comic strips, like the 4-panel strips, those were definitely like inspired by the Floyd Gottfredson strips of that time. And really, I was looking at a lot of class struggle for that era, and really that dichotomy between like rich and poor of the Great Depression. And so I really tried to write with that kind of comedic sensibility, that like vaudeville, hobo humor, like kind of sensibility.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. I would have thought you guys would like split it up like into like each story you like went along the way, but that's really interesting. You had like a bunch of them like planned out, like because like and like obviously the promotional comics were like given like basic story beats, and you guys had like adapt them from there. I love that.
Yeah, so it was really kind of coming up with different concepts, like, oh, this is what different kind of cartoons might have been of that era, and then really breaking it up from there, just like, oh, like, okay, now that we have the idea of a concept for the story, then let's go and do a comic based on whatever that concept was. So, and then the hard part was just with so many stories in one book, was trying to figure out a way to make each of those stories different. Because when you have like 20 stories in one book, it's kind of hard not to repeat yourself. So just creating that kind of uniqueness for each of the stories, and making sure that we were highlighting a different a range of characters, making sure that it wasn't all Boris stories, all Bendis stories, all Alice stories, making sure the Butcher Gang showed up in different ways, shapes, and forms throughout the stories. And then we created an original kind of super capitalist character in Boswell Lots of Bucks.
I'll talk about him in a minute.
Yeah, so he was him and the Woolly Triplets and then Ruby Goldberg were all original characters that were created kind of as additional foils. So it wasn't all just the Butcher Gang every story. Which we could have done, but it would have been hard to think of that many like Butcher Gang specific characters.
That, and also the Super League goes against Super Boris and the Super Boris story. Those are really cool characters too.
Yeah, those were fun. Those were all just pulling directly from villains from the game and giving them just a little tweak so they fit in with the kind of comic strip universe.
Yeah,
Like
that's what
Brute
everyone thought it was,
Boris.
but we never knew. Like the Brute Boris one was the most obvious one, but like the other ones and the projections, but like Miss Twisted was like no, everyone thought it could be like, oh, maybe it's like a reference to Twisted House, but there was never confirmation. So now you have it here first, everyone. Confirmation about that.
Yeah, she was definitely Twisted Alice. That was her kind of initial genesis point. And then we added the springs in because like Miss Twisted Alice.
Yeah. Now, speaking of Boswell Bucks, the character we're talking about from the comics.
Yes. Yes.
I'm gonna use him as an example. Because there was a couple examples of this. Was the fact that character designs such as him changed over the course of the comics run? Was that intentional? Like, for example, Boswell's design changed from the syndicated era, or the comic strip era to the syndicate era. His design changed. Was that like a reference to like how or not like how characters change designs, like within like the animation industry, or?
Yeah, that was definitely one of the things we that I noted in the script, and actually came through because we did have two artists adapting the script, so it was actually kind of a natural transition.
Oh, cool.
That character had kind of and also had kind of a different vibe, like between those earlier chapters, and then he shows up one time later in the story in Train Trouble.
Yeah.
And we did like the idea that he kind of started and he had more of a rudimentary design, and then the later strips he was definitely more like a Peg Leg Pete. He had a more exaggerated kind of rubber hosey style, and kind of mimicking how a lot of those characters started pretty rudimentary. Like Steamboat Willie looks way different from like a Mickey Mouse cartoon 10 years later down the line. Or if you look at any of those classic characters' original appearances, like Betty Boop, Boop looks dressed, well, not too drastic, but she's a dog in her first appearance.
Yeah.
And then she ends up being a human. So yeah, all of those characters had some pretty extensive changes as they went on. So that was something as the eras progressed that kind of naturally came in with that artist shift, but it was a good side effect of having two artists working on the book.
Yeah. Thank you for answering that, because that was like my favorite question I wanted to ask, like during the whole thing. And let's see, we got a couple. I think we have 5 more questions.
Okay, I'm down.
So we have, who was your favorite Bendy character to write for, both like from the game universe and the original characters?
Yeah, so I realized very close to the beginning of the project that I was going to be the first person to ever write dialogue for these characters. Like Bendy, Alice, Boris, none of them had ever.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't think either none of them or not many of them. Yeah, Bendy, I was the first person to put words in Bendy's mouth, which was a kind of intimidating once I realized that. And so I had to come up with kind of a way to determine, what that character was going to sound like. And Bendy pretty quickly became like a little kind of con man. He had a little more like, not shifty, but he had kind of a more like playful con man vibe. Boris was definitely kind of more of a country bumpkin, and Alice ended up being, a little more sophisticated, more like kind of Hollywood glam. That was kind of more the voice that resulted in my mouth, that like kind of transatlantic accent, which Alice's voice actors had dialogue. So I kind of, that already was in the back of my mind. But yeah, so developing those voices was really important to me. And then forgot what was the original question. I started going off on a tangent about their voices.
You're good. So I was saying, like, out of like all the characters from like both the original
Oh yeah.
game characters and the game characters and the original characters you guys made up for the comics, who was your favorite character right from each category?
Yeah, so definitely Boris ended up being, I knew he was my favorite character to start, and then he ended up being my favorite character to write, just because he's so flexible as a character. Like, you could just throw Boris into a situation and he becomes very naturally comedic.
Yeah.
And then we were also kind of excited, or I was kind of excited about the Woolly triplets being a addition to the books. I don't know if they'll ever end up in the Bendy extended universe. I get asked that every once in a while, if the graphic novel characters will ever pop up in the video games, and I
I
have
hope they
no
do.
yeah, I have no control or power over that, but it would
Yeah.
be super fun to see even just some cameos. The Woolly triplets were just kind of fun because we wanted to give Boris his own like Huey, Dewey, and Louie. But I thought it was very funny that they were sheep hanging out with a wolf. I thought that was very ingenious on my part, but it's just a silly little gag.
That's cute.
So yeah, those characters were fun to like pull in to give like Boris this like mentoring kind of vibe. I also Papa Pluto was also one of my favorite little additions I got to throw in. That there's this big not big bad, but Bendy has like down in the underworld, he's got kind of a looming figure that's kind of pulling the strings, or is causing chaos too.
Yeah. I always really liked Papa Pluto as a character. I thought he was pretty cool. Oh, jeez. There we go. Sorry, my voice was echoing like because of how tight I had the headphones. Anyway, I always really liked how you portray like Bendy. It's just like sure he could be like very troublemaking, like kind of a jerk at times, but he meant well. You know what I mean? He had a heart of gold. That's how I always thought of Bendy being. And Boris, you nailed too. I all of them you nailed. All the characters you guys nailed. Like in terms of like
Thank
how they
you.
like look, how they act, everything. Um, everything. I love the original characters too. Boswell probably being my favorite one because he's just like he has to. It's like funny like in all the original syndicated comics he appears in. He's tormented by Bendy and Boris because he threw like the $1 bill into his fire, and that's what I and many other people think like the main reason why it's so funny that he just keeps getting tormented by Bendy and Boris. It's really funny.
Yeah, I really, for those Great Depression era comics, you don't have to hold back your punches on how evil mega rich people were,
Yeah.
because they were huge huge jerks who were exploiting society and caused their own downfall. So it was, maybe there's parallels to today. But yeah,
Yeah.
he was a really fun character because he's so kind of callously and stupidly evil. He's
Mhm.
he's not trying to be awful, but he's too rich and he doesn't know how
He gets to
awful his
notice.
actions are.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right, we're down to the last four questions.
Okay.
How does it feel? I think we kind of mentioned this a little bit, but I want to see if you can like, give any more information about it. How does it feel to be able to expand and flesh out the Bendy cartoon world a little bit via the comics? How does it feel like that you got to do that?
Yeah, it was definitely a big responsibility every time you're playing with someone else's toys, essentially. You're, especially as a cartoonist that has been pulled in for several licensed Scholastic graphic novels, often which they have approached me, and I've had some awareness of the properties, but not full awareness. You really want to be respectful of what
Mhm.
the original creators have built, and also what you kind of have to take fan expectations into account. In just like fans are going to have very clear feelings about like Boris wouldn't do this, Boris would do that. But you kind of have to subvert them every once in a while, or sometimes you kind of have to say, well, the fans aren't writing this story. I'm the one writing this story.
Yeah.
So I do have to make kind of some creative decisions, and I try to write very good fanfic that everyone will enjoy. So, but yeah, there is kind of a responsibility to playing with the characters that people are really passionate about.
Mhm.
And you grow to love the characters too as you're working on them, but you are you're a steward of making sure that these characters, I didn't want them to act wildly out of character, or do
Excuse me.
things that fans would be totally outraged by, especially like I said, being one of the first people to write Bendy's dialogue, who had no connection to the video game team.
Well, you did a very good job with it, in my opinion, and I think many other people can agree with you on that. I'm sure you get like a bunch of comments still to this day. I'm assuming like on how cool that these comics are and how to mean to people.
Yeah,
Um,
it's interesting. It kind of comes and goes, but every once in a while, people will reach out to me about
Yeah.
Bendy. I'm surprised how many people don't directly interact with me, and sometimes I'll just get my little Google notification saying something with my name in it, and I'm like, oh, I I didn't realize there were certain things I didn't realize were such speculation after I put them out in the book.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny, what things people were really excited about that I didn't even have an idea that they would pick up on.
All right. Wait. Oh, we kind of answered this one. Actually, no, I didn't. Okay. Question number 12 or 11. I forget what we're on. What was your favorite story in the Cracker comic you guys got to work on? I like all of them. But if you had to pick a favorite,
Let me do a quick flip here.
you're fine.
Um,
While I'm doing that, I'm gonna say like something while you're looking at that I'm to the audience. Guys, remember my Streamily print with Aaron Lane is up on Streamily for the next love stream. So if you want to get signed by Aaron, please check the link in the description. There'll be the cheesy little ad probably shown in here somewhere, but it'll be thrown in here somewhere. So, but yeah. Anyway, back to the interview.
yeah. So I quick did my flip through because there's
All right.
a bunch of stories I really like, but Super Boris was really fun just because I got
so
to write
good.
a golden age superhero comic, similar to, I read a bunch of golden age superhero comics like The Hour Man, Red Tornado, the Ma Hunkel strips, where it's just she was a big influence because she just puts a soup pot on her head and that's her superhero outfit, and she's just this like ghetto, like she's based on these like mothers in the Jewish ghettos of New York. And she's like this golden age superhero that ran around in her long johns and a pot over her head. So yeah, that was I got to read a bunch of those to kind of get some inspiration. And then Alice the Aviator, like I said, I didn't think I'd get to do a World War I pilot comic. I thought they would shoot that one down. You throw out all your wildest ideas and then you see what they're going to ask you to reel it back in on. And that one, I was so excited to get to do an old-timey like Joe Kubert DC Comics war comic. It was that was a super fun surprise that I got to do in the midst of a Bendy graphic novel.
Yeah. But one more additional like small mini question: who was the artist who like at the end of the Super Boris comic, you see the Spider-Man reference where he puts like the suit in the trash can? Who was the artist who drew that? Do you know?
So that was Ciro.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember Ciro's last name.
Because I always wonder that it was such a cool little nod to like the little Spider-Man comics, the Spider-Man comics.
Yeah, that was in the script. I wrote that in as a reference, and then Zero beautifully executed it. So
Well, thank you, Sierra, for creating a great piece of art in this comic and other things too in here, of course. But the Super Boris ending is like one of my favorite like shots from this comic. And the final two questions are: what are your personal, if you could choose like anything like to mention about like the personal hopes for future of Bendy, what would it be as a franchise? Where would you want to see them go?
personal hopes in future. I would, of course, love to get to write another graphic novel. I don't think there's nothing in the books for any time in the near
Yeah.
future, but if they ever came back to me and said, "Hey, we want another one," 100% would dive in all over again into the characters and into the lore. Um, yeah, I another graphic novel would be great, but I would love to see them explore the franchise in all sorts of locations, different, like I know the amusement park, um, that was a setting. And yeah, all the different various permutations of how Bendy could show up in the world, the same way like those old cartoon characters show up in our world. I think Adrian did a really good job. I loved the like Fleischer animation style world that she built with her one novel that I read through while I was doing my research. I thought that was genius, and I'd love to see, yeah, Bendy just appear in all those different kinds of settings. I would love to see, yeah, a story similar to that with the comic book writing team.
I feel like that'd be really cool. They are making a Bendy movie. I'm not sure if you heard, but they announced a Bendy movie like, on a Christmas Day. They announced a Bendy movie, so I'm very excited for that.
Oh man, I've been so wrapped up with the holidays. I haven't checked in on the news, so
Yeah,
I will eagerly be awaiting the Bendy movie for
the
sure.
people who worked on it apparently are Radar Pictures, who worked on the Jumanji movies, and one of my favorite movies, stupid movie. It's stupid funny. You know what I mean? The Bill and Ted movies. They worked on the Bill
Oh
and Ted
yeah,
movies. Those are like some of my
yeah.
favorite movies. Shout out to the Bill and Ted fans in the audience, if there are any. And then last but not least, the most important question I ask, a similar question every time. Do you have any tips or advice to give future artists who want to become comic book or cartoonists or comic book artists or like anything in that similar field?
Yeah, so I would say, studying the basics never hurts, and you'll always find new things, whether that's in your storytelling, studying new kinds of ways of growing your storytelling abilities, and even like anatomy and physiology. Like if you're an artist, definitely, like I've been going through and trying to work more on my anatomy and physiology. I've been going through the morpho books lately and trying to build um my knowledge of that, so you're always learning and growing. You're never if you're feeling stuck, that means time to break out the sketchbook and try something new. The other thing is finished projects are more important than unfinished projects. So I of course am terrible at starting and stopping a whole bunch of things. And I sometimes have a lot of trouble finishing something because I'm not ready to let it go. And I just want to keep dragging it out forever and ever. But if you're looking at, kind of getting the attention of people who are looking for different, new artists, new talent, new creators, it never hurts to have a new finished project that you can say, hey, I put this out into the world recently.
Mhm.
So that's what I tried to do with um, just my day-to-day creative practice, is making sure I make new art that people can enjoy, that's like one and done. I try to do a short story comic every once in a while just to throw out there for people who enjoy my work. And you can have a beautiful sketchbook with great drawings, but if no one ever sees it, or if you never finish any of those projects that you're working on, it's hard to gain momentum in your career.
Well said, Vannotes. And thank you everyone for watching this and second interview of the season 2 debut of Inky News. I'm AlvinMunk. This is Vannotes, and thank you everyone for watching. See you next time.
The end.